The impact of drugs. As you know, antibiotics are very difficult on the gut biome, but does it mean you go take probiotic pills? No. A lot of times you can just eat probiotic foods. The things we mentioned in the past are miso paste. You can put those on your vegetables. You can get fermented vegetables. Again, our December, we're going to do a live show or a live thing like we're doing Zoom now. But I'll be in the kitchen and I'm going to be sending you some things that you're going to need to bring with you to that so that you can make your own fermented vegetables and sauerkraut. So we're going to do that together for our December lesson. But clindamycin and augmentin are some very difficult antibiotics on our gut biome. So short courses are okay, and sometimes we need them. But long courses become difficult to our systems. So making sure you're taking in probiotic foods is better than taking in. And when we do yogurts, remember it should sheep and goat. We try to avoid all cow products because of the chemicals in the cows that cause a lot of disease and inflammation. Proton pump inhibitors. So sometimes you're put on antacids because you have reflux. The better thing is let's change the diet. I found when I get people off dairy and off grain, if they're having reflux and getting them off of carbonated drinks and alcohol, the reflux goes away. And then they can take that medication and they start lowering their blood sugars and blood pressure and their weight starts improving too. So we really want to make sure you understand this because it's so important because one thing leads to one disease after another. Disturbances in the gut biome lead to obesity and all these other associated diseases. Healthy bacteria, on the other hand, provides an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant response. Certain bacteria like Providentia can be harmful to rheumatoid arthritis, but other strains or subphyla of the Prevotella bacteria can actually activate dendritic cells, increase the number, which increases our memory and firing of our brain. And this indirectly can induce a pro-inflammation to get rid of old senescent cells, leading to a higher level of longevity. Again, that comes from that healthy bacteria. The demise of the biome decreases the short-chain fatty acids. Remember, we talked about it as the poop because it's funnier that way. It's actually a byproduct of the bacteria. So when we feed the gut bacteria lots of fiber, that gut bacteria produces short-chain fatty acids, and those short-chain fatty acids are huge at decreasing inflammation in our body. Very interesting studies that are coming out on cancer, colon cancer, and melanomas. When they fed those patients during their cancer treatments a high fiber diet, i.e. high vegetable diet, their response to chemo was much greater than their cohort who ate a regular American diet or whatever they wanted to eat. So very important, push the veggies, guys, push the veggies. The other thing is when there's dysbiosis, that unhealthy gut bacteria, there's a disruption in vitamin B12. Why is that? You guys remember, your gut biome makes your B and your K vitamins. It makes your neurotransmitters too. Like it makes your GABA and it makes your serotonin and it makes your dopamine to get you energy and positive thoughts and keeps you happy. So when we have a dysbiotic biome, unhealthy biome, we get more depressed, but it also can decrease our B vitamins and our K vitamins. So that's the reason why a lot of times, not only will I have you check your vitamin D levels when you see your doctor, but I encourage you to get your B12 levels checked as well. All right, this is a little heady science here, but we're almost done. So this is about the genes. So when we thought about aging, we thought, well, the DNA and the genes is just going awry and that's causing aging and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, that's not always the truth. We just learned about all the things you can do to slow down the aging process. But there are things that happen in the DNA that do promote aging. So here's the chromosome. So our chromosome is where all the DNA is wrapped up. And the way it's wrapped up, the DNA is wrapped around these little histones. And these are part of epigenetic responses. And that helps activate your DNA to actually turn on certain stem cells to make them become new GI cells or new heart cells or new whatever when it's replacing cells in the body. It make me do different types of behaviors at different times of your year or during sleep or during wakefulness. So these really regulate new formation, and all the activities of our cells and the brains of our cells are wrapped, the DNA is wrapped up around these histones, and then these histones are wrapped around in this core, which we call chromatin. And the interesting thing is then these are then put into this actually, all the DNA is packaged in actually what is called the chromosome. And there's 23 pairs. You get half from your mom and half from your dad. And the tops of the chromosome have these little things called telomeres. And we know that as a cell replicates over and over and over throughout life, the telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter. So they said, well, telomere shortening is associated with aging, and it is. But when they tried to elongate telomeres, it actually can induce certain cancers. So you don't want to just push things that elongate telomeres because you can activate a cancer series. So you have to really allow God to do what God intended to do. But what you can do to keep yourself healthy is to do the things that we talked about: the nutrition, the exercise, sleep. Gene instability. There are certain genes, the ApoE, the FOXO3, the IGF-IR, that's insulin growth factor 1R. Those genes actually propagate aging, but you can keep a balance. And we're going to learn about some things that help keep them in check. Epigenetic modifications, these histones right here can be modified, and there can be a methylation group on there or removal of a methylation group. And there can be loss of this chromatin that leads to aging. And this packaging can be disrupted that can lead to aging. Loss of healthy protein imbalances due to the instability of an unhealthy biome. Metabolic changes in your cells, the mitochondria, the powerhouse in your cell that, remember, is where that formation of free radicals actually happens in the mitochondria of each cell. And so we want that antioxidant diet so that we can reduce free radicals. Senescence. Once a cell becomes aged, if you don't get rid of it by intermittent fasting periodically, what happens is, and again, intermittent fasting can just be not eating between meals. It doesn't have to be extended fast. If you're a very lean person and you're not way overweight, you can do intermittent fasting where you're not eating between meals. Okay. And so that becomes okay for you. Or maybe you eat normally and you may have snacks, and then you may do a weekend where you do 2 meals a day. Or there's other you that have lots of weight to lose or a lot of inflammation and a lot of disease state. You may be more aggressive where your weight is able to be more aggressive with the fasting states. By fasting, we kill off old cells. Old cells need sugars and protein especially to grow and to turn over. And when we starve our cells of the sugars and the proteins, the starches and the protein, it causes old cells to die. And what happens is that becomes healthy because senescent cells actually activate the cells around it, become old too. So it's like it propagates aging. So once a cell becomes aged, if it doesn't die off, it can activate the cells around it to become aged as well. And that's why intermittent fasting and also heat and cold exposures help decrease inflammation and change this dynamic. Stem cell fatigue. So those stem cells are premature cells that end up being directed toward making new muscle cells or heart cells or eye cells or different gut cells. So those stem cells actually don't activate and turn into what they're supposed to if we don't get enough sleep, if we're not doing intermittent fasting, if we're not eating a healthy diet, if we're not spending time praying and getting rid of the stress in our lives. Because what happens is we take that stress on, that stress causes free radicals manipulating those cells and making stem cells unhealthy and other unhealthy areas in our body. Altered intracellular communication, the activation of the immune system. So this becomes all very much what's happening in the genetic angle of our cells. Calorie restriction helps the neurocognitive pathway through SIRT1. It helps with bone regeneration through SIRT1. It helps with, even when you don't completely restrict calories, but you have a moderate decrease in calorie amount, you're activating both SIRT1 and SIRT3, helping to prevent heart disease. The question is, they saw it in mice. Is it happening in humans? Hard to know. But they're going to be doing more determinations to see, is it also happening in humans? The benefits of aging was through the activation of SIRT1 by inhibiting the stress-induced death of cells, therefore promoting cellular survival for new cells to help them propagate a new life and a healthy life. And again, this also inhibits mTOR, because remember, mTOR we talked about was that pathway that induces aging. But if we can inhibit mTOR, it actually promotes autophagy, death of age cells in the hippocampus of the brain, improving learning and memory. So remember, we talked about this before in when we mentioned about how Hippocrates and Aristotle used to ask their students to fast for 2 days before they would come to lecture, because it made their brains very bright and aware. And if you yourself have ever tried an extended period of fast, you have much more alert brain. And those of you who believe in Jesus, God would have never sent his son before the devil in 40 days of fasting, but that's where his brain was on task and he was firing, delivering the most intense ways of dealing with a very stressful situation. So very important activities, and you see the pathways in the brain and the way they work.